Noswaita Kamri. Thank you. I'm afraid that's as far as my Welsh goes this evening. But I just want to say thank you so much, Wells, for the welcome. I'm so overwhelmed to just see how many of you have turned out this evening to come and fellowship with us, and to come and encourage us, I think, and inspire us. So thank you very much. Thank you, Alright Baptist, for the welcome. Thank you, Minister Morgan. And thank you, Christian Aid Wells. So this evening, I think we're going to have a conversation. And I think my job this evening is to launch us into the conversation that we'll be having. And since it's going to be a conversation, it won't be just me talking. I think I'll talk for a little while, and then others will join me so that we can talk. And to start us on that conversation, I want to present this as a story. It's a story that doesn't have an end at the moment. And it's a story that has been partially written. And it's a story that I'm hoping that together we can try and write the next chapter and see what role Christian Aid and what role each one of you and what role collectively we can have. And I'm hoping that when we've written this story, the different sort of pieces of the mosaic, that one day, 7 years from now, we can look back and it will look absolutely beautiful because we took time to be a part of this narrative and of this story. So this is how it starts, or rather, this is where I found the story. I was in Ethiopia a few months ago, and I visited a region, South Omo. It's on the border with South Sudan, in a place called Jinka. And we traveled, so we flew to Jinka, and then to go to the communities, we drove for about 3 hours. The roads are very rough, mountainous, and it's actually quite challenging to be there. And we went to visit the communities there. The land looks barren. It looks like it doesn't rain there. It looks like nothing grows there. In fact, you would be forgiven for wondering, how does anything survive in that place? But we went to visit communities. There were women and men that we saw. And we sat down with them and we talked about what their issues were. And the self-help groups that Christian Aid has been working with our local partners. There are over 200 self-help groups that we have set up in that region. There are over 3,000, I believe, in Ethiopia. And each self-help group has about 20 women. And so I sat down with them and I said, talk to me. And one woman put her hand up and she said, well, this is how the story goes. It doesn't rain anymore. It's been getting hotter and hotter and hotter each year. Before, it used to rain occasionally, or it used to rain and we used to have drought occasionally. But now, it's every year. It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. The crops are dying, the livestock are dying, we can't get to health services, we can't get our children to school. And as I listened to this woman, I thought, she had articulated in a very simple and very straightforward way the challenge that faces us globally today. She had talked about climate change in such a way that you didn't need to be a scientist to be able to articulate or to understand. She had simply shared with me and my team that this was her life. That while we sat in conferences in New York, in the UN, or in Paris, she had said, this is my lived experience of the impact of climate change. I walked away and I thought to myself, we need to be doing more. In very recent memory, only last week, and even as we speak at the moment, Christian Aid works in Malawi and we work in Zimbabwe. You will all have heard of Cyclone Idai, and it's very present at the moment. In Chikwawa district in Malawi, over 16,000 households have been displaced. When I watched this on the news, I was shattered, because in August of last year, as I was trying to get to understand the work that Christian Aid does in the different countries, I went to Malawi and I visited Zimbabwe. And guess what? I was in Chikwawa district. I met with the women, with the children, and they told me about how happy they were that, now they had income generation activities, they had solar-powered irrigation. They showed me their crops, and they said, with this, we've done some market analysis, and we'll be fine. I went off to Zimbabwe, went to Manicaland, and the women sang and danced, and I've got photographs, and I've got songs on my phone from both communities. And so I sat in my living room on a Sunday and I watched the drama of Idaya unfold. And I thought to myself, I've been there, I've met those people, and now they don't have a home. That is the lived experience of the worsening impact, not just of climate change, but that's the lived experience of economic models that the world has that are hardwired to continue to feed the greed of the wealthiest communities in our world at the continued expense of the lives of poor people. And so the story continues to unfold, because this is where I found it. I talked to my colleagues on the ground. I said, what are you going to do? And in Malawi, they told me, we're already on the ground. We've set up a camp, and we're here at the camp, helping those that have been displaced, giving them food, providing them with support. And I said to the ones in Zimbabwe, Nicholas, what's happening? And he said to me, there's no road, Amanda. We cannot cross. We can't get to them. We are parked outside here, and we can hear, we can see, but we cannot access. My brothers and sisters, this is the lived experience of people out there. The world is broken, but it's broken at a very fundamental level. It's broken in a way that we can't even begin to really grasp individually. But collectively, we see some of those things playing out in our own communities here. When we go out and we see people who are homeless, the working poor, who are sleeping in cars, in the fifth wealthiest country in the world, we have to stop and ask ourselves, what's gone wrong? When we see an increase in knife crime, we have to ask ourselves, what's gone wrong? And so when you look at what is it that is broken, then the story unfolds further, right? We have destroyed the earth that God gave us to use. The Bible says that it said, here, go into the garden and cultivate it, not destroy it. We were meant to look after it so that it could generate resources for us. It could feed us, but in a way that was balanced so that that ecosystem was not destroyed. But we have created a very dysfunctional model, a model that creates power and wealth. And to survive, for those that have the power and the wealth, they need a continued exploitation of both human and resources, people and planet. That's the conversation that we've been having in Christian Aid. That's the conversation that I would really like us to have this evening. But I don't want to have that discussion and conversation about what is wrong. I would like to have a conversation about, for the next 7 years, for example, for us, for the Christian Aid strategy, what is it going to look like? How do we want to write that narrative? What is the story that we want to tell? What do we want to be able to say to our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. When they look at this beautiful piece of art that looks back, what are they going to see as our contribution to the story of change? For me, one of the things that I say is that while the world is broken in terms of the economics and the politics, I say to my colleagues in the organization, let's not forget the role of religion, the role of faith. It can be positive and it can be damaging. Let's face it. Let's have a candid and honest conversation between ourselves. Let's celebrate when faith has really helped to transform the world into a better place. But let's acknowledge when through faith or religion, some bad things have been done. And so one of the conversations that I had, which is part of the story that is emerging, is the story of the Dalit community. And when you ask the question, was it the Indian government that defined the Dalit community as being untouchable? No, it was not. It was religion. And when you go around the world and you look at the violence and the conflict that is happening, you ask yourself the questions. It's disturbing to see just how much of it has got religion sitting right at the heart of that disturbance. And so we are called, in terms of a prophetic voice, in terms of challenging the powers, structures, the systems that keep those that are oppressed in positions of vulnerability and multiple disadvantage. It's at a time like this that we are called not just to challenge the systems out there, but to look at how we contribute to those systems. The church, religious groups, run over 50% of all schools worldwide. What are we teaching if what is coming out is high levels of intolerance, social and political? No tolerance for those that are different. What are we teaching? When you look at the investment portfolios of a lot of religious institutions right across the world, you would be amazed. You know, religious groups own 8% of all domestic land, habitable land in the world. They own over 10% of commercial land in the world. And that is before we go to the financial flows of religious institutions. And so when I talk about speaking truth to power, let us be credible by not just pointing out to the politicians and to the private sector and to the multilateral bodies, but let us also look at ourselves and ask ourselves, is this what God would have us do? What does that story look like? You know, when Christ came and he looked at what had happened to his father's house, he was angry. And, you know, I can imagine that, you know, in breaking the tables and showing his displeasure and saying, you know, you have turned my father's house into a marketplace, I could quite imagine that he might look at what we have done with the earth at the moment and get angry and say, you have destroyed. Look at what you have done to my father's home. But this is a conversation that we're going to have this evening. And let's have the conversation, not in despair because of a broken world. Let's have a discussion, a conversation that shows that we're people with a blessed hope. We're people who really believe in something and somebody that is divine. We believe that actually, when everything else might appear to be dying, that there is life that emerges because of our faith. That's the conversation that I would like us to have this evening. And so, in that conversation, because the story has no ending at the moment, I cannot end the story. The only thing that I can say is, how does it go? What is the next chapter? Yes, we might have a vision of what that might look like. Of course, we want a world where everybody is acknowledged as being born equal before God, is equal before God, is treated with dignity. We want that restoration We want a new relationship with creation. Not just a new relationship with the planet, but a new relationship with each other. We want to recognize the wrongs of the past, but we want to be able to build from there and look at justice. And that's the last thing that I want to drop into this conversation. You know, as Christianity, we are definitely different. We're not the same as Oxfam. We're not the same as Save the Children or other organizations. We are different. We are different because of those values, those fundamental values that are the bedrock of our organization. And in solidarity, we've been able to achieve a lot. But what is required of us going forward in this story is how do we bring justice into the picture? How do we show love into the picture? How do we ensure that love and justice are not words that are frowned upon, but that actually they are ambitions for a world that is different, a world that is good? So what are you going to put in this new narrative? How are you going to write this story? Let's have a conversation. Thank you.